And we are live.
All right, we're live. So the technology seems like it might have worked, right?
I think so. I think it's not the most professional way of doing a live stream, but like a camera, videoing a camera screen is not always.
You did all put, I got to give you a ton of credit. You just did all put this together about, 10 minutes ago. So
Yeah, about 5 minutes ago.
So 5 minutes ago. So everybody, welcome to the UTD Scuba by Diving podcast. I'm Jeff Seckendorf, and here with training director Ben Voss. Hey, Ben.
Hello. Coming from Norway, and we got some students with us.
With a crowd, so introduce us.
We got Chris over there, and we got Tom over there. Tom is from Belgium, and Chris is from Australia, now living in Norway. And we got a Dutch guy.
Student lost, right?
We lost a student. We got a Dutch guy here. You know what the Dutch are. We got him, and he's left the building. He's called René, but he is probably gonna come in a minute.
All right, we did establish you lost him in the house, not in the water.
Exactly. I don't know which is worse.
All right. All right. So this is our live version of the most obscure questions in scuba diving podcast.
That's right.
And I don't know which number this is, but it doesn't matter. We're going to do this one, and then we're actually going to do another one live at DEMA in a couple of months. So we'll get our fill of live obscure questions. So I don't know what the questions are. Do you know what the questions are?
No, actually, I don't know what the questions are. Oh.
All right.
Let me just...
Okay, well, let's have one. Let's just start right in. You're in Norway with an essentials class, or was it tech?
No, tech class.
Tech class.
Tech class, yes. We been here now since Tuesday, and living in a fantastic house. It's a shame it's dark right now where we are, but otherwise we could have shown you the whole fjord. We're on the water, so we're basically, there's an undergarment hanging right there. You can take your undergarments and walk down the rocks, because there's no mud or sand or something here in Norway. It's rock and water. So you walk down the rocks, jump in the water, and you got 8 meters of water in crystal clear Norway.
Oh my God, that's crazy. Is it cold?
It's 18 Celsius.
The water is?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I should have joined you for this one.
Yeah, it's fantastic here.
That's my kind of temperature.
Today we went diving on a huge shipwreck called the Seattle, a Second World War shipwreck. Really big, and it sits on the cliffs with the back end. The stern is at 21 meters, or 70 foot, and then it drapes down over the rocks all the way going down to past 230 foot, 240 feet.
Wow.
It's a beautiful shipwreck.
Wow. Beautiful. Fantastic. All right. Well, so your students, are Tom, Chris, and the lost one, are going to provide the obscure questions. Is that the plan?
Yeah, that's the plan.
All right. Well, let's see if it works.
I think so. So, we can just kick. I mean, we've been answering questions all week long. And now we can't remember half of the ones that were asked, so we're going to see if we can make new ones that we haven't covered yet. So I think...
Yeah, that sounds good.
Chris, if you're the one that starts.
Yes, hello. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Chris.
When we were talking about ratio deco, and one of the great advantages of ratio deco is that it's flexibility and can be changed on the fly or changed according to how we feel on the day going in, whether we've been a bit sick recently or divers getting older or whatever. But it's never sort of discussed how that is changed, like what changes can be made and to what degree changes are made. So that's sort of, the question. To what degree, or what are the changes and to what degree?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a really good question.
It is a very good question. It's like a light one to start off with, right?
Yeah. So I can actually start this because you did mention aging up, which is becoming, unfortunately, my specialty. One of the things I noticed as I was aging up, going through my 50s and early 60s, is that I was exhausted after dives consistently tired after dives, especially tech dives. And I kept experimenting with different things to try to make this problem go away. And, we always make fun of the people who are on the boat falling asleep after the dive, saying that, oh, they must have done a crappy ascent because, one of the first, non-visible signs of decompression sickness in the mildest possible way is fatigue. So I was getting all this fatigue, and my assumption was it was a very, very mild symptom of some form of decompression sickness. So what I started doing was doubling my shallow stops on every dive. If it was 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, if it was a recreational dive, a simple tech dive, and I was supposed to do, a minute at 20 feet 6 meters and a minute at 10 feet 3 meters, I would do 2 or 3 at each of those stops. And if it was a tech dive and I was into, 3 or 4 minutes of shallow or 10 minutes of shallow, whatever it was, I just doubled it.
Yeah.
Whether it's back gas or oxygen, and it completely solved the problem. Like instant solution to my particular physiology.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it ever since. And that was about, 10 or 15 years ago I figured that out. So that's one thing that you can look at is, do you find that, and a lot of this has to be empirically figured out, if you have something going on with you physiologically, I think the first thing is to do more time in the shallows, particularly on oxygen, and see what happens. You've got to just try it and see what happens. So that's one way to look at it. So, Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, well, we had a little short discussion about this here the other day, and just the sheer fact that you're asking the question is getting you on the right frame of mind that your decompression approach is a moving target, right? It is a moving, living creature you're dealing with. I mean, your body doesn't respond to the same stresses in the same way time after time, even though the circumstances are the same. Your body's reaction is different. I mean, and the other day I gave the analogy between, like we sometimes do, not every time, but sometimes, between people who do physical exercise, like cyclists. You can go for a bike ride, and Chris is actually also an avid bike rider. We've been going on some nice rides here so far. But doing the same effort on a bicycle doesn't feel the same every time. You can ride up the same hill at the same power, and your heart rate will be different from one day to the next. And that's because our bodies are physiologically under stresses from all outside factors. And if you look in the materials on the ratio deco, the contributing factors to decompression stress are vast. And the fact that we cannot really determine yet still where all these things are coming from, we know it's a little bit linked to the immune system. We know thermal exposure has an influence. And I think, and I said this before, I think the next frontier in decompression theory is going to be nutrition. What we have in our bodies in form of antioxidants and maybe ketones, and how our body has been dealing with that. Because we know that what you eat has an impact on your immune system. And then
it's so interesting that you said that, because I was just sitting here thinking, I've been doing a lot of research on sodium levels in our bodies. Yeah. And one of the things that happens if you drink too much water without any electrolytes in it, you actually change the dilution of sodium in your body, and your body can actually get dehydrated because it's your body is saying, well, there's not enough sodium and there's too much water, so I'm going to start peeing out all the water.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about if there's been any kind of research on sodium and electrolytes as it relates to decompression and safety in diving. Because, even when I'm sitting here today, there's a pinch of Celtic sea salt in my water.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's always to try to keep the level up.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very common thing. It's something called hyponatremia. It's basically water poisoning. you drink too much water, you dilute yourself from the inside out. So
Yeah.
your body's constantly looking for an equilibrium of the sodium in your cells. And if you then introduce too much water, like you said, the sodium is getting pulled out of yourself and you're dehydrating yourself by drinking water. It happens.
It's so counterintuitive.
It is.
But when you look at the physiology, it makes so much sense. And I think that, on boats, on dock, everybody is drink a lot of water.
Yeah.
And, when you're sitting around in a dry suit, you're pouring out sweat because it's hot on the surface. And, anyway, I think that's one thing. So, but to stay on target with Chris's question is, Ben, you hit it right spot on that, your personal needs of decompression are a small moving target within the big scope of staying in compliance with ratio deco.
Yeah.
You can't go changing this thing, 50%.
No.
You can make adjustments to accommodate, I think I'm dehydrated. I know I'm dehydrated because it's 90 degrees, 35 degrees out, and I just spent a half an hour in my dry suit waiting for someone to get ready, and I'm just drenched in sweat.
Yeah, exactly.
Your nutrition was crappy. You are exhausted because you're excited. So you woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're staring at the ceiling for 5 hours.
Yeah.
All of these things contribute to that ability to make it a moving target, which is the best reason never to blindly follow your computer on a decompression profile, because it doesn't take a single bit of that into account.
No, exactly. And that's, then obviously he comes with the second question when we had the talk, because this dude is a biologist in mammals. He used to, study whales and stuff, so he knows a little something about what's happening in the body. And then he says, okay, that's all fine, but then still, where do you put the changes if you do want to account for the fact that you think that you are on the day more susceptible to decompression stress? And then, do you do that in the deeper portions or do you do that in the shallower portions? And that's when I said to him, you can do whatever you do in the deeper portions of decompression usually has more to do with gas reserves on the bottom portion, and the shallower you get, the more you address the slower tissues that are off-gassing. So when we want to really get clean, it's like as if you've noticed on your own body, when you really want to get clean, it's the shallows that make the difference. So make the last stops a bit longer, and especially emphasize on the final ascent. When you think the deco is over, don't go doing that, okay, we're now at 6 meters, the decompression is over, poof, and all of a sudden we're at the surface.
Yeah.
Then you really should crawl to the surface. In the new Ratio Deco 3.0 materials, we also emphasize this, because when I did the research on it, it actually showed, okay, when we do a slower ascent in the deeper portions, not to say deep stops, but in the deeper portions on decompression gases and use our S-curve, we might get those faster of the slow tissues really squeaky clean, but the price is the fact that we have a bit of on-gassing on some of the slower tissues intermediate that we have to deal with in the shallows. And then the way we counteract that is just making the shallow stops a little bit longer, a tiny bit longer, and the final ascent is slow and really slow, like at least a 5-minute ascent, what we call a 5-minute ascent, meaning when your decompression is done at 6 meters or 20 feet, for every 10 feet or for every 3 feet, you take a minute to go every 3 feet up. And it might sound really, really slow, and it is, but it's extremely beneficial. Extremely beneficial.
I have to do a plug for how smart we are in creating a course called O2 Cleanup for recreational divers. Because this addresses some of the most stressful dives recreational divers can do, which would be 100 feet or 30 meters right to the limit of NDL, because you're just pounding inert gas into your slow tissues.
Yeah.
And then if you do your, race to 15 feet, do 3 minutes and jump on the boat, it's kind of a train wreck. So we added this option for recreational divers who've been through our Rec 2 or Rec 3 class to add an oxygen bottle. It doesn't extend your bottom time at all. But you get to 6 meters, 20 feet, you do a switch to O2, and you finish your ascent, your recreational ascent, on oxygen with generally a 10-minute cycle. And it solves a myriad of problems related to this, the slow tissue loading that happens on those really stressful dives. And that, of course, that 100-foot, 30-meter dive for 30 minutes or 20 minutes on air, that's the same kind of stress you're talking about when you extend your deep stops and you're cleaning out the fast tissues with the bubble model, but you're also continuing to load some level of slow tissues with the dissolved gas model.
Yeah, and it takes account for both. Actually, we did a dive that's very similar to that today, the second dive. I mean, we were not in availability today for the trimix gases due to, whatever, availability. So we did a dive to maximum of 30 meters, but then pushed to the NDL limit, and then used the oxygen for the decompression. And you come out the water squeaky clean. And we talked with Tom about this, like, hey, how do you do this at home when you go dive, a recreational dive with someone who isn't tech trained and you want to keep your tech skills fresh? You just bring the oxygen bottle and you do the gas switch at 6 meters. And
and you just make an agreement that 6 meter stop, that 20-foot stop, is going to be 10 minutes.
Yeah, or 5 minutes.
With oxygen, it's good without oxygen.
Exactly. So yeah.
Awesome.
So to round up, I mean, the fact that you're asking yourself questions and being skeptical that your decompression is a moving target is great. Acknowledging that it is something to consider the other contributing factors instead of honing down on 1 minute here and 1 minute there. That's the least of your problems. Focusing on good technique, good buoyancy skills, good judgment on thermal exposure, all that sort of stuff. That is what really makes the dive squeaky clean if you get out of the water. And other than that, like Jeff said, you can experiment a little bit, not by changing it 50%, like not going as if the recommendation of ratio deco says you need to do 8 minutes at a certain stop. Let's see what happens if I only do 3. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. No.
But you can at the shallows experiment. Like I say, hey, do I feel fresh after this dive? And then the next time, maybe spend 5 minutes longer or do a slower ascent even further, and see if that helps. And it's this balance we talked about, right? Because another thing that came up during the class was the beauty of ratio deco is that you can adjust it on the fly underwater, and then the argument comes, what my computer does that also, right? If I stay longer than I should have, my computer takes that into account. If I take shorter time underwater than I've planned for, my computer gives me less deco. That's in no way different. However, the computer does not link that to your gases. So if you underwater want to take proactive choices about your decompression obligation later on, you can actually using ratio deco, because you know the profile to in its entirety, you can take educated choices before you take the choice to stay longer or abort further. And
when I was doing all that experimenting with the shallow stops back, when I was getting tired, I probably did that first run of testing for myself over like 20 dives or 30 dives.
Yeah.
And it was never less than the prescribed deco ever. I never did less.
Yeah.
I moved it around a little tiny bit, but mostly I just kept doing more and more and more until I finally settled out. And the last 5 or 6 dives in this little testing protocol were very successful with adding X amount of time at, 20 and 10, 6 and 3, with and without oxygen. So as you experiment, it's important to figure out where you're going to go longer, not shorter.
Yeah.
That's our disclaimer.
Exactly.
All right. So your students are now learning how we actually do obscure question podcasts, right? Because that's one question, and I think we're 15 minutes into this thing.
Yeah. That's one question.
There's never a lack of talking.
No, exactly. I can see in the chat here on YouTube there is the long hose only there to make it more complicated than an octopus, and how to tell a male from a female shark during the shark dive.
All right. The long hose one we've covered quite a bit, but I think that we can start that one off with the name of our company, right?
Yeah.
Which is Unified Team Diving.
Yeah.
As opposed to what we used to call it, which is Unified. It's not Unified Go Screw Off by Yourself diving.
No.
So we can talk about the history of the long hose for 5 minutes if you want to.
Well, I asked the question to one of our instructors who had someone that wanted to try a scuba dive for the first time, and I asked him if he had heard some questions about, from today, and that's what he wrote in, and I said, well, this is a good question, and I get this question also every so often, like, why the long hose? Initially it might look cumbersome with all the extra stuff, and the long hose, the length is another story compared to the fact that we're donating the gas that we're breathing, the regulator that we are breathing. That's the essence of it. And the way I explain it most of the time is we like to give the diver that comes with a problem a solution and not ask the diver to go find the solution somewhere on your person. So if you come to me with a out of gas signal or gas not available signal, I need to have your gas source, you get handed a regulator that is working and it gets presented to you right in front of your mouth, basically. And if you take this into normal living, it's like, we're at the gas station. Damn, I'm hungry, I forgot my phone or I forgot my wallet. Jeff, can I borrow some money from you to buy a sandwich? Sure. And then you stand at an odd angle with your hip towards me and you ask me to go dig around in your pocket for the change you have in your pocket because, well, you want my money. Here you go dig for it. It's right down there. That's a bit awkward, right? You would just reach in your pocket, grab some money and give it to me. And that's the same thing we do here. So instead of, hey, I'm out of gas, well, go here. Go look where there's something you can breathe off me, and take it. And you don't know how it's attached, and you don't know how it's going to work. But hey, here it is. Have fun. So we like to donate gas from our mouths that it's working to the other diver's mouth, and then we go find the backup regulator on our person ourselves.
Which is easy because it's always hanging around.
It's hanging around your neck.
And to do a plug for our friends James and Brando at the Great Dive Podcast, they did like 3 episodes in a row on this golden triangle disaster concept.
Yeah. That
you have this regulator someplace in this area on the front of your body, but nobody knows where it is. Some are yellow, some are blue, some are green. It's just a disaster. So that's the point. You're getting something that works. The other thing is, and this is, I'm a fan of the 5-foot hose in some cases, and I know a lot of instructors, UTD included, argue with me about this. But when I introduce my wife to the long hose, she is never going to go in an overhead environment. She is never going to have to share gas single file ever.
No.
And a 5-foot hose allows her to route the hose exactly the way it's supposed to be, in front, around your neck, in your mouth, and never have to bother tucking it in, dealing with it, hooking it under a canister when she doesn't have any of that. So in those situations, I think that's a great way to introduce people to the concept and the ability to donate and not be, 4 centimeters from somebody's nose when you're dealing with this.
Yeah.
And not have some of the extra workload that comes with the traditional 7-foot hose.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a good thing.
And for the metric people amongst us, he's talking about a 1.50 m hose as opposed to the 2.10 m hose.
The 2-meter hose.
Yeah, and
Right.
I agree completely. If you have a diver that is absolutely 100% sure, hey, this cave diving or wreck diving or overhead diving, in any case, that's not me. And then a 150 hose or 5-foot hose is
5 foot.
perfectly adequate. However, if you do want or maybe in the future interested in going in a single file scenario, yeah, here we go. Then you have the 2-meter hose, 2.10 m, because that's why it's 2.10 m, because you can then share gas in a single file scenario. I mean, the donor on the behind and then the receiver in front, donating the long hose. And because the divers are single file right behind each other, now the hose can actually reach the diver in front. So yes.
Yes. Very, very specific situation. And those of us who are using this 7-foot hose, the 210 hose, are just doing it because it's one less thing to change all the time. Because if I mean, in reality, the shorter hose is fine. The 5-foot 150 hose is fine if you're not going to Cape, but I don't want to be dealing with it. And I've been doing this for 20 years. It's easy just to
leave it the
tuck it in.
same.
So, but in conditions where people are saying, "Oh my God, I can't manage it. There's all this extra hose. I got to have a canister." Blah 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 blah. It's like, well, try this version of it.
Try this.
You don't have any of that stuff.
Exactly. So I leave it up to the biologist amongst us to answer the question about the shark. How can you tell the male shark from a female shark? And I feel a dad joke coming up, but I'm sure it's right.
The male sharks will have claspers just behind their anal fins. The two sort of little extra finger-like appendages that hang out from the back of the anal fin.
Like balls, basically.
Basically. And they're there to help the reproductive process take place.
All right. And
Is
what
that
about
true
the
of
female
every
shark?
species
Females
of
are
shark?
nothing. Sorry?
Is that true of every species of shark? Or almost
No.
every? The common ones we'll see? White
Most of the common ones you'll see. I think it's common through all of them, but I'm not 100% sure. But that is the
there we go.
standard.
So get your binoculars and start looking at the anal fin.
I was just going to say, did anyone else hear the fact that we called them anal fins? I've never heard that before.
All right. So
Cool.
the next thing we have to do is invent binoculars underwater.
Yeah. I found my student.
Wait. Can I do a rant?
Yes, of course.
Can we take a diversion?
Good.
I saw an ad. Thank God we're not sponsored by anybody on this podcast. I saw an ad for how to keep your team together with this brand new invention that will always let you know where everybody on your team is. And I'm thinking, what kind of weird camera technology with a head-up display and a goggle mask and all this stuff? It was, are you ready? Do you know about this?
I think I know where you're going.
It was a mirror.
Yeah, I've seen those.
It was a mirror.
Yeah.
Somebody invented a mirror.
A mirror to go take underwater.
A mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see your team.
Yeah.
I was like, damn, I want to invent something like a mirror.
Well, you know
Would
what?
that be cool?
I think I can. The mirror should be called the psychic mirror, and then you should sell it without the actual shiny surface. Because hear me out, right? Because if your team is not in front of you, and they're not below you, and they're not beside you, on either side, guess what? They're behind you, and you don't need the mirror because you can tell they're not anywhere else.
Oh my God, that was I'm still laughing about that.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for a podcast where I can scream about that because that was another one of these amazing inventions that tries to fix a knot problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there you go. I don't recommend a mirror.
No. I mean,
Thinking is good. Mirror is not.
no, exactly.
All right, who's up next?
I think Tom had a question.
Yeah, the next question is much lighter. Actually, we had here a very nice recreational week with 3 buddies, all with the same mindset and the same goal inside. But then what happens after this course? We go home back to our home buddies with who we dive every week. Not necessarily with the same mindset and with the same training they had locally. So how to gently try to incorporate UTD's mindset into your body's daily routines?
Yeah, very good question.
That's a really, really, really good question.
Yeah.
And not simple to answer.
No, in a way, yes, and in a way, no. I mean, one thing that we sometimes encounter that people that take our classes get the answers to a ton of questions they had, but maybe not knew they had, because everyone by now knows that all the things we do have a reason, if not multiple reasons, for every single small detail. Like why we put hoses in certain ways, why we put harnesses in certain ways, why we route hoses in certain ways, why lights are where they are, why pocket content is in certain... Every single detail has a reason. And sometimes you get taught that that's just the way it is. And then the value is lost because the explanation stops with that's just the way it is. And then there's
no time should a student accept an answer that is because we've always done it that way.
No, exactly. That's not an answer.
Yeah.
That's an explanation. So if to then come back to Tom's question, that means that sometimes they become the Bible bashers. They become the preachers. Like, now I've learned so many answers on all the questions I had, and they start preaching this to the whole club or their whole community when they come back, and then end up having no one to dive with because everyone always feels bad because here's this guy again that's going to come and tell us everything how we're supposed to be doing everything. So usually I caution the divers to say, hey, don't go preaching everywhere you come. Do your thing. Say, if someone asks, explain why you do it the way you do it. And that's it. Let them see the value on their own. But talk diving. And I think I made a video on this a while back that on the courses we have a bunch of jargon we use, like rock bottom, like min deco, like a mod S on the surface, like a pre-dive check or our GLAD dive plan. Don't go using the internal UTD isms with people who have no idea what that means. Because it makes them feel maybe inadequate, or should they know this, and they become like hesitant about their own knowledge. Just call it like it is. So if you're, for example, willing to get a little bit more in the habit of actually planning a dive to its entirety and not just say, let's go that way underwater and see what happens, then just say, hey, let's do a dive plan. Take out your wet notes and you'll read the GLAD acronym from your wet notes without saying, let's do the GLAD thing. Just call it what it is, and then they might ask, what is that? How are you remembering that? And then you can show them. The same thing goes with put yourself in a underdog position. So if you want to do a flow check before you go down underwater deeper than 3 meters, just say to them, hey, listen, my undersuit feels a little bit tight since last dive. Do you mind if we just stop at 3 meters and I just make sure that I can reach my valves and everything is good? It will help me out. And then they feel they do you a favor, and that way you've done your flow check, and they'll probably look at you and think, oh wow, maybe I should do that as well. And by doing it that way, you can introduce these small things that we take for granted and do as standard, and you can introduce them through that way without making yourself the asshole no one wants to be with.
I agree with all of that, and I think that not to go home and say, oh my God, I can't dive with anybody ever again. I think the thing is to go home and say, what are the common areas where I think before I took a UTD course, I might have been compromising a little bit of my safety. And then focus on that. So, again, for me, it's this race to 15 feet and blow to the surface, which I would never, ever, ever want to do. So if getting into a situation with a recreational diver, the conversation beforehand is, look, I have this ascent thing I'd like to do. And it just gives us a little time at the end. We're doing an 80-foot dive, a 24-meter dive. We're going to go to half that, hang out, and then do this nice slow ascent. And then I'd like to spend about 5 minutes at, 20 feet, 6 meters, and kind of chill. So if you can bring that part of it first as say, these are the things that I could do at the end. I want to try it. And that way you're not in any way compromising your own personal safety by chasing somebody, through an ascent profile that is terrifying. And that's kind of my take on the initial thing. And then, again, what Ben is saying is true. As people start to see you, they will say, well, that looked pretty smooth. How come I was, hanging me onto the line for,
dear life.
Desperation, because I couldn't hold this little 6-meter stop, and you're just like chilling there watching the fish. So we'll bring it in. But I think the thing is, do dive with everybody. Don't compromise your own safety.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what we talked about. Like, okay, now we're going to do a technical dive, and some of them have come from previous technical training and have now, I think you had some technical training, right? And now have seen like, oh wait a minute, now there are a little bit of gaps in my knowledge or my abilities. Oof. And I wasn't aware of those gaps before. And if I now go back and dive with people that have also that training that I used to have or had prior, how do I cover that gap again without being the one that's going to point fingers at everybody? And that just boils down, do the dives, keep it safe, like don't compromise your safety, like Jeff said. Make sure that you plan the dive within the parameters so that you are in a better position to stay in control. So on these tech classes, we deal with a lot of complicated failures on equipment and on the team in general. And they take some figuring out. They take some thought process underwater to actually deal with the fact that you have to solve a complicated problem underwater, and not everyone is able to do that. It took these guys a couple of days to get their head around. I found my student.
Yeah, so there you go. Good.
He's just walking. Come and join us. God damn it.
If you show up at a dive and you've got on a dry suit and twin set and a can light and the hoses are wrapped and everything's like, looking so simple to us, but like, you look like some commercial hard hat diver to the guy standing next to you in a wetsuit and a snorkel, and a single tank and a BC that's probably falling out of the BC. You can't stand there and say, all right, we're going to do this dive now. If I have a failure on the left side, you're going to watch me do this, and I'm going to switch this, and I'm going to close this valve. You can't do any of that.
No.
You can't do any of that. You just have to just not do any of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just go for your dive.
Yeah.
Go dive with the people with the snorkels. Have fun. Make the dive amazing. Go see the cool stuff. And then, talk about it when you're having a beer at the end of the day.
Yeah. And when it comes to doing a technical dive with someone that you don't know has the same problem-solving skills that you guys have learned during this week, keep it super simple and be aware of the fact that you might have to call the dive earlier than you might have liked. Because now you know certain failures are fixable and certain failures are non-fixable. But for them to be fixable, your team needs to be able to figure out that they're fixable, right? And nobody that doesn't have the training nor mirrors that can look behind you can actually help
I know what
solve
you're
the problem.
talking
Yeah,
about.
right? So
Yeah.
in that way, you have to acknowledge the fact that, okay, wait a minute, I have to put myself, and it puts a lot of pressure on you as well, in such a way that my communication to this diver is so super clear and so super simple that they know what you mean underwater. So if I give you an example, if you hear bubbles behind your back and you close the valve of the side that you think the bubbles are on, and the bubbles do not disappear, remember, now we are in maybe land. Now it may be the other side, it may be the manifold on this side that you hear correctly, or it may be the manifold on the other side that you hear correctly. It can be a myriad of things. So be sure that, okay, if bubbles are not disappearing by me turning off one valve, isolate the doubles, and then in your communication, see if he just can tell you which side the bubbles are coming from. So look at me, there are bubbles, and then point, is it there? Question mark, like with your hands up, like a big selfie that makes question mark.
Yeah.
Or is the bubbles on that side? They'll probably be able to tell you.
Yeah.
And then you know if you've shut down the correct second stage and breathing off the one that is not leaking. And then forget if it's fixable or not, just exit the valve.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I was going to say, is that, you know, anytime you get into a situation like that, it's like, okay, let's just share gas and go home.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, why create a problem, you know, and you said this a dozen times in podcasting, fix your problem when you know it's a problem and you've got a moment to fix it, not allow for another surprise coming up later when something else breaks.
Exactly.
You know, when we started training on side mount, we had like, you know, on double back mount, we had 9 failures.
Yeah.
You know, we created this system of like 17 failures on side mount.
Yeah.
And it was impossible to deal with and remember. And what we got it down to was 2.
Yeah.
Bubbles and no bubbles. Right?
Exactly.
If you have bubbles, isolate. If the bubbles don't stop, share gas and go home.
Yeah.
If you have no bubbles, open everything. If you still have no gas, share gas and go home.
Yeah.
It's so simple. And,
Yeah.
you know, figure it out on the boat. Don't figure it out underwater.
Well,
That's
exactly.
what's killing rebreather divers.
Well, we had actually during this class, one of our students, he's not in this podcast, he's shy. So, I mean, he was on the rebreather with the side mount configuration linked into his rebreather as the bailout. And, you know, once he figured it out, I was like, okay, this is super simple because if it's bubbling on my right, I can just isolate and turn off the right and then see for myself what's going on and fix it or non-fix it. And so on and so forth. So what you're not supposed to do if you're going to dive with these people is then try to solve your own problems further than you have learned to do so. So don't go down the path of closing off one valve, the bubbles are not gone, isolate, then opening that valve, then closing the other valve, the bubbles might not be gone. Don't go down that rabbit hole. Like Jeff said, the capability of the team, the strength of a team is the combined knowledge of the team. The combined knowledge of the team has been reduced by the sheer fact that not everyone has the same level of training. That means the level is supposed to be lower. You cannot fill in that gap by then figuring out your own ways of doing things. Because you've learned, stop one, isolate the other, and that's it. More than that we cannot do. We're wasting gas and time and introducing surprises later on that we could have gone without.
Absolutely.
So
now, to add one piece to Tom's question, there is one scenario where I would not dive with people at home, and that is when somebody is carrying gas less than rock bottom.
well, exactly.
To me, that's the hard and fast rule.
Yeah.
That, you know,
And shared bailout.
with the excuse that, well, you know, I'm, you know, a tiny person. I weigh, you know, 50 kilograms, 100 pounds. My sack rate is teeny tiny. I'm always going to have enough gas. in my little single tank. So I can go below rock bottom. No.
No.
Because you're not carrying rock bottom for yourself, you're carrying it for your buddy.
Yeah.
So, they want to have a snorkel, a BC with the tank, no plan, blah, blah, blah. I can manage all that. What I can't manage is being in the water with somebody who doesn't have enough gas for me. Because I know in that situation, if something happens to me, my deal is I'm not going to try to muck around and fix this. I'm going to share gas and go home. If the person with me doesn't have enough gas for me to share gas and go home, then we've blown the whole concept of what we do and have been doing forever.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, the choice to go underwater rests with you.
Yeah.
So,
we're not,
I mean...
And we're not the scuba police.
No, it's okay to say no.
We have to create personal parameters that say, where am I comfortable? And I'm comfortable with almost everything.
Quite a lot, yeah.
But not rock bottom.
Exactly.
Not breaking rock bottom.
Well, I mean, Casper and I were invited once to come here to Norway to dive a very special wreck that I have on my bucket list of dives to do for sure. But we both kind of agreed that the team that invited us was not diving in the same way that we like to go diving, and we declined. We said, sorry, we will do it another day. But it would have been a really great opportunity to come diving, and we could have just been, selfish and just go for our dives. But it was kind of expected to join with the team, and so we just said, maybe next time.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah.
Good, and not to, all right. So here we go. I think we've done 3 questions.
Yeah. So now that we found our lost student who was sneakily listening to the podcast from the other room.
No, I was sitting on the dock of the bay. So.
Sitting on the dock of the bay, like Michael Bolton over here.
I was joining the view on the fjord. So
do you have a question to drop in the hat here?
Well, not really.
You must have. You've been the one that was the most vocal the whole course.
Yeah, but that was focusing on the team. So
come with something.
Yeah.
Or anybody.
Anyway, let's see what's in
You
this.
have a question in the chat.
Anything in the chat?
We're talking about the shark.
Yeah, the shark we did. There's one why the canister is, when the battery canister is on the right and the light head is kept in the left hand. Well, that's basically to do with the long hose. That way we have a long hose retainer. Plus, the buckle that closes your belt and the front of your webbing is on the left-hand side of the webbing. So it's a pain in the ass to get the canister through the buckle. Every time you have to take the buckle out. So it's easier to put it on the side where there's nothing, and there's no D-ring, and there's no nothing. So it's much easier to put it on the right-hand side. It's a quick.
It does look counter sometimes because it seems like the canister's on the right, how come the light's not on the right? But a lot of this was designed around scooters, which are almost always managed in the right hand. And that leaves your left hand, free to use the light. And
that's a good.
The light can point at the depth gauge, which is on your other hand, and so on. There's a thousand little tiny reasons for these things.
That is the reason why we talked
and
about.
none of the answer to those questions is because we've always done it that way.
No,
it's
the light's in the left.
Trace back where this stuff came from.
Exactly, the light's in the left because you donate with your right. You don't want to blind and give gas at the same time. The light's in the left because, from a legacy point of view, the screen of your bottom timer was non-illuminated, so you could light on that and see where you're at. Whereas the screen of your compass is usually illuminescent, so when you shine your light on it a little bit, you can take your light off and look at the compass and see the dial. On the other hand is, if you're scootering and your computer is on your right hand, your scooter hand is facing forward and you can read numbers of your bottom timer when they're on an angle. But then looking at the compass, you have to hold the compass in a certain orientation to yourself, so that's why the compass is on the left. So, we can go down.
So I think it's just a good example of how all of this stuff is part of a system. And the system has been in place for long enough that there is some legacy. We don't want to just deny that, that's not part of it. But for the most part, we can find a reason for all of it, which I think was one of the first things you said.
Yeah.
about 2 hours ago when we started this 3-question
Would a large
podcast.
battery pack affect stages or anything as well?
Yeah, also, I mean,
flipping on and off
a side benefit of a larger battery pack is actually it helps to counterbalance the weight on the left-hand side. I mean, there's a ton of benefits of having it on the right-hand side, yes, for sure.
So I have a question, if we don't have anything else.
Yeah.
This is interesting. So I have a coaching client who we've been working with, and Ben, you know him. And he's really focused on travel diving.
Yeah.
And, we looked at a lot of different models to get him more gas when traveling for longer dives, not so much deeper dives now, but for longer dives. And one of the ideas we came up with was, instead of pushing him into doubles, which is normally a problem when you travel because they're hard to find, or completely reworking his whole system into side mount so he can bolt on, 2 tanks or 3 tanks or whatever. We made a suggestion of normal singles, and if he needs more gas, grab a stage.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? I mean, I think it's brilliant. But what do you think?
It can be done. I mean, why couldn't it be done? The thing is, the stage, and we talked about this during his class when I was over at the States, right? That and he came to the conclusion almost that now, because of the training, he actually has better skills, and his gas consumption has gone way down. That now this whole question or this whole need is kind of becoming moot because he's now got better skills. Now he doesn't need the gas anymore. But if it's still a thing, yes, I why not? I mean, why is a stage only for technical diving, right? If it's dived in the correct way, and it's in our philosophy, we don't have a stage as a pony bottle. And a pony bottle, in the sense of the word and in the industry now, is an extra cylinder that's hanging off of you as a stage bottle would, but you're using it in case of an emergency. In case you run out of gas, then you can go there. And that's not the way we dive. When you run out of gas, it's your team that's your backup. The way you can use a stage, regardless of what's on your back, is you dive the stage first until that's gone, and then you go back to your whatever's on your back. If, however, during the dive an air sharing scenario arises, you still end up sharing gas of the gas that's on your back. So by using a stage, you're extending the time until you need to use the back gas, and then you can extend the time on the back gas even further. So if those principles are adhered, I think adding it that way is no problem. Why would it be a problem? Of course, you have to maintain the NDL and all that sort of stuff.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You have to maintain that you stay within recreational diving limits when you do that stuff. You cannot turn that into a tech dive. But you can definitely, on a shallow dive, extend the dive time. If you dive with someone that does have doubles, for example, and you don't.
So I took this to another crazy limit, which was, there's a lot of shore diving here in San Diego. For years, I've had only side mount. And I just think that diving side mount doubles on the shore is just a huge pain in the ass.
Yeah.
It's just you need 4 hands, and you're trying to carry 2 tanks and your fins and your mask and blah, blah, blah. So I took my side mount system, the new side mount system with the shutoffs and the QC6s and all that, and I took a back plate with a back plate singles wing and a single tank, and I threw that whole side mount hose thing over my neck. And I plugged the back gas tank into the QC6, and I plugged the stage in the other side, and Bob's your uncle.
Yeah.
It was amazing. So now I can shore dive singles. Yeah. And if I need a second cylinder, I can just keep that whole single system together and just grab a stage and go. And it just has so simplified my life and my joy of shore diving. I'm all over that.
Yeah, I think it's one of these things that it's not so seen, and then when it's used, people judge before they think it whole completely through, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And we've had that with the MX configuration on the rebreather, and we've had that with the side mount configuration. And now slowly the industry is adapting. It's like, hey, it's working. And now the MX configuration of our rebreather is now called by another name. And it's like, oh, it's like that configuration. Well, we've been kind of doing that since 2008. But yeah, whatever. You call it whatever you want to call it. You know? So.
Yeah, it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So
did you figure out the question? Or
No, I'm sorry.
for a couple of
Come on.
short ones, right?
Sorry? Well, I didn't
We have
hear
time
you.
for a couple of short ones, quickies.
Yes, a quickie. Come on. You're Dutch. You know a quickie. Come on.
You funny guy.
Don't leave me hanging here.
All right.
Yeah,
anything else in the chat that looks interesting?
I got one. Why is it so? I noticed that it's so misunderstood to be redundant. Most of the divers I speak with, they think their redundancy is for themselves, but it used to be redundant for your team or for your body. So
Yeah.
that's a big misunderstanding.
Yeah.
I always come into.
So you call that a quickie?
No, no.
So let's talk.
It's up to you.
I want to start that out with the idea of how we train versus how we dive.
Yeah.
Which
And the
99%
misunderstanding
it's the same, except we train multiple failures and we plan for one.
Yeah.
We dive a plan for one failure, one kind of, big failure. We don't, because in the course of training, you might, have a valve failure followed by a mask off and then something else. But that's not because that's going to ever happen to you. It's to help you learn to think things through underwater and logic stuff out and look at where your team resources are. But we plan our dives for only one catastrophic failure.
Yeah.
In doing that, if you have a team of 3, your redundancy is the fact that everybody has the same stuff, which means you've got 3 of everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of the system, right?
Well, true.
Yeah.
True. And it's very common and very, I think, maybe logical to go down the thinking path of saying, okay, wait a minute, if I move away from recreational diving into technical diving, that means that my journey to the surface is hindered either by a hard ceiling in a cave or in a mine or whatever, or by a decompression ceiling. And that means I need to be able to solve my own problems underwater. So that's why I have everything redundant, double things that keep you alive are twice on ours, like 2 first stages, 2 second stages, separately from each other, 2 tanks, all that sort of stuff. So it's very easy to go down the path of thinking, wait a minute, I can now become a solo diver because I can solve my own problems. The thing is, we still need to team, as these guys have figured out, to make sure that we've taken the correct path in our problem-solving mumbo-jumbo. So the fact that you are still dependent on your team to get you into a stable situation so that you can afford to dive in a safe manner, that's why we have redundancy, because we want to be in a position where we don't hinder our team as much with a failure we have on our equipment. And this is where the difference becomes. Because if we look at recreational diving, the longest time an ascent will take ever is 8 minutes. From 100 feet, 30 minutes, the ascent takes 8 minutes with a gas share and everything else. And it's always a straight line towards the surface. There's no underwater navigation. There's no complexity with regards to line management and all that sort of stuff. There's no decompression obligation with regards to gas switching and all that. It's not there, so it's a relatively simple exit. In the worst case scenario, let's call that an air share. So there's no need for all these redundant stuff in recreational diving because we can just simply air share and go up. Now, why, if we then go down the road of saying, wait a minute, failure points, and we as UTD have been giving a lot of slack, especially for our side mount system, that it has a ton of failure points. there's more hoses and more O-rings and blah blah blah. Well, if that's such a big problem, then why do you not just dive a technical dive on a big tank with one first stage and one second stage, and have as little elements in your diving equipment? If all the failure points are such a big deal, then why, when the diving becomes more complicated, do we bring more failure points, right? I mean, a twin set has more failure points than a single tank, because there's more hoses and more O-rings and more yada yada. Because we train for the failures to stop them and stabilize them. And like I said, the exit of a tech dive is much more complicated than the exit strategy of a recreational dive. By being redundant, I can stabilize the problems on my equipment so I won't have to go into an air share with my team, but now my team can assist me on the way out independently of them, but still within the team. Because now,
if it's fixable. I mean, don't forget the fact that if something's fixable,
yeah,
you can shift to a different part of your own system while you're fixing the fixable,
yeah,
and your dive continues.
Exactly. And that, I mean, but hey, in the worst case, if everything fails, that you can still, exit the dive in an air share, except the path to get to that final last resort is larger. And that's why we're redundant. So we were redundant with our equipment in technical diving so that there is a bigger buffer between me having to hinder the team with the failure on my equipment. And that's not the same as now you can dive solo because you can solve all your own problems with a mirror or whatever. It doesn't work that way.
How many mirrors do you have to take?
I don't know. Well, exactly.
I mean, do you need two, or do you have to have one in your pocket also?
Well, I guess you need two, right? One primary and one backup.
Maybe one looking forward and one looking back.
Oh, that's it, yeah.
Just one on a selfie stick in front of you.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
It could be.
Yeah.
We do know as instructors, of course, that, if you want to hide from a student, I shouldn't say this on a podcast because everybody will know, but if you want to hide from a student, just go above them because students don't ever look up. So I guess you need a mirror that looks back and you need one that looks up.
You know what? These students have figured that out, Jeff, because they were hiding from each other the whole week.
Successfully completed another Obscure Question podcast, which is super cool. I like doing these like this. And for those of you who are going to be at the DEMA show in New Orleans in November, we're going to do another one live, like we've done every year for the past few years. And so bring your questions, and we'll do that. So, thanks, Tom. Thanks, Chris. And thanks to the hidden guy.
Yeah.
Whoever he is, Michael Bolton.
Sitting on the dock of the bay.
And thanks, Ben. For,
It's fun.
Figuring out the technology. Yeah.
Well, I think next time we'll probably do it in a little bit more professional setup. I'll dig into this OSB software again one time soon.
Yeah. But in the meantime, this was fun, and so thanks everybody, and thanks for listening.
Yep.
And as always, leave us a rating and review because it makes all of it better. More people listening, more reach, more all of that.
Yeah.
And we have some cool stuff in queue, right? We still owe a podcast on the breather systems, which we'll have to do soon now. And then we still have a management announcement to make.
Also.
UTD.
Yeah.
That, we'll do a podcast on that coming up soon. That's really cool. Cool changes, and do come see us at DEMA. So.
Yeah, in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Bring your voodoo.
All right. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you all in the next one.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.